Welcome to another Restored Church podcast.
We are so thankful you are here with us today. We are kind of in our third week of our Counter series. And we're coming out of our Greater Things series, and now we're kind of in this idea of God's economy. God's coming. And the first week, Dylan shared about healing. And last week, he shared about generosity. And this week, we want to talk about confession. If you've missed either of the first two episodes, I highly encourage you to go online or on whatever app you have for your smartphone, whatever it is, but find those messages and listen to what God shared through Dylan. So this idea of counter, this idea of what does it mean to be living in the different lives, a different mode of life. When I was in college, I could not have a pet in my room. So I thought it would be something to kind of come back to my room to. And so I went to the pet store and I found the aisle of like the aquarium stuff, because we couldn't have hamsters or anything like that in our rooms. And one guy actually brought a snake to campus, and we wasn't able to have it there. So David took care of it while the young man was at school at our school. So as I was looking through the different, walking by the different aquariums and different stuff, looking at the fish, I was like, a goldfish, anyone can get a goldfish. And I remember walking down, and I looked down at one of the areas, and I saw a little blue lobster. It was this electric blue lobster, and I thought, that's it. So I bought it, and I got all the stuff you needed for it, and I went and found a tank online, a 25-gallon tank that I was going to buy. And of course, if you've ever known that if you don't need a 25-gallon tank, you don't want a 25-gallon fish tank, so you get rid of it any way you can. So I got it for super cheap, and I thought I was going to have just one lobster in a small tank, but now that I have a bigger tank, I can get two. So I went to the store, bought another one, and I asked to make sure that I got a male and female. So this is going to be my side hustle, my side gig, and I was going to raise lobsters, and I was going to sell them on the internet and have this amazing side gig to fund my college tuition, and it didn't really work that way. And as I had these lobsters in my room, and it kind of became this side attraction where every few weeks I'd bring goldfish from the fish store, and I'd put them in the tank, and they would eat them. And it was an amazing thing to watch, because the goldfish would jump in there and think it was just this huge open tank, and they'd be swimming by, and the lobsters kind of hide back in the castles, and all of a sudden it'd jump out, grab the goldfish, turn them upside down, and just eviscerate them and eat them. And it was when I would do the feedings, the guys would come in to my dorm room, and we'd just kind of sit around the fish tank waiting and hoping this thing would just destroy these goldfish in front of us, right? And I remember hearing, after I had this tank in my room, I remember hearing this kind of scratching sound. Now, we all know what that probably means, right? Mice, right? It's got to be a mouse somewhere. And so I went to Walmart, bought a trap and some peanut butter, put it together, set the trap, put it in my windowsill. And there's a small hole in the windowsill, and I thought maybe the mouse would come up out of there and it would grab that trap. And so I remember waiting, and I set the trap, went to class, caught a mouse when I came back. And I dumped it in the trash can, set it again. A few hours later, had another mouse. Set it again, and next thing I know, I had caught 5 mice in my room. So I really only had one pet, which was the lobsters in my room. And so as I was in my room one night, getting ready to go to bed, I noticed that the lobster had found the air hose, and it started climbing up the side of it to escape. And so I went and I put we had the little fish net catch thing, and I tossed it down, and it knocked the lobster down to the bottom of the tank. And I went to bed, and I put a little piece of plastic on the top of it to make sure it didn't climb out. And the next day, I noticed that he was trying to climb up that hose again. So I went in again, knocked it down to the bottom, put a bigger piece of plastic on it, hoping that it couldn't take it away. And then a few nights later, as I was in bed, I go to sleep, wake up the next morning, I get ready for the day, and I look in my tank and drop a little food pellets in there. The lobsters were gone. I have no idea where these things are at, right? And I look at the back of the tank, and the plastic piece is gone. I think to myself, okay, all right, they climbed out, so I tear my room apart, I pull stuff out, looking everywhere, can't find them. So I think, well, then the next logical step is I blame anybody else in the dorm with an earshot of me. So I run up and down the hallways, pounding on the doors, threatening them with an inch of their life to return my Blue Lobsters that I know they've stolen, right? Of course, no one confesses, no one says they have them, and so now I'm here with this 25-gallon tank and no lobsters. And so I went about my day and went about the next few days, and about a week and a half later, I was supposed to be doing my homework that night, and I got sidetracked by rearranging my room. So I was pulling all my stuff off the walls, and I was moving stuff around. My desk was going to go over here, and I decided to pull my bed away from the wall and move it to someplace else. And in our school, it was the heaters in our school were the old radiator heaters. So they have this huge boilers, and they pump the hot water through it. And so I pulled my bed away from the wall, and down by the heater, I noticed something. I noticed down by the heater, kind of underneath one of the little pipes, something blue. And so I kind of get down there, and I start pulling things out, and I pull out a couple of claws and some shells. And I'm pulling out what are left of my blue electric lobsters. And so I think to myself, how in the world could this happen? How in the world does this actually happen at this moment, right? And then my mind went back to, I know who did it. I know who was responsible for the death of my lobsters. You see, this is what happened. That night that I went to sleep, the lobsters started to climb up the top to get out of the tank. And the mice that were living in my room decided they were going to help the lobsters escape. So they climbed to the side of my tank, ripped off that piece of plastic, and helped the lobsters get away. And they started, come this way, let's go over this way, right? And so they bring the lobsters under my bed towards the heater to show them the way to escape my room. Except for it was a trap. See, these mice had set a trap because the mice mafia know that if you take care of anyone in their life, they will take care of you. And so these mice cornered my lobsters and held them captive, trying to get a confession out of them. Who did it? Who took our family's life? Who killed the other mice in our family? And the lobsters fought back, right? They had their claws out like this, and they were snapping back and forth, trying to get these guys out of their way. And they fought, and the mice tortured them and ended up killing them because they would not confess to who did it. And so they left the remains of the lobsters there as a warning to me to no longer go after the mice mafia in my room. You see, if the lobsters had just confessed and said, oh, no, we didn't do anything about this, it was the guy in the bed. He's the one that took the lives of your mice. You need to take them. Go get him. But see, they didn't do it. They refused to confess. Maybe even if they would have confessed, the mice probably would have killed them out of retaliation anyways. See, our culture that we are in views confession as a weakness. And if you confess, we're only going to do a partial confession. I'm only going to share with you part of what I was involved in, part of my heart, part of the confession. See, this culture shows that confession is not good, so we hide our lives behind the Pinterest boards, only showing these good moments, these good things, these things that I want people to see. And we as humans fear these moments of confession. We are expecting to be swallowed up if I confess. If I confess my sins, my brokenness, my heart, that person or God is going to swallow me up. See, we anticipate great loss when we lay ourselves bare in confession. And we show up as we are, not as we want to be seen. See, what confession does is it takes off the shell that we're hiding in. It rips it apart. But see, when God meets us, He doesn't do it to rip off our shell to harm us, but to show us His love and mercy. And in these moments, how will we be met? When we come to God or come to others with confession of where we missed the mark, where we've sinned, or where we feel like we are broken, we are met with mercy rather than vengeance. How often in our lives we fight the sacrament of confession because we don't know what's on the other side. You see, confession takes ownership of the moment. See, true confession says, I'm going to own this. This is where I'm at. The culture's confession is the Houston Astros confession. If you don't know about that, go look it up. But the Houston Astros are kind of fake confessing at this moment. So confession owns the moment. See, in Jesus' economy, confession is not a sign of weakness. It is seen as an act of mercy, placing yourself in a position of owning the moment, even when it's not easy. We've used the Beatitudes as kind of our center plate for this series, and so let's read through the Beatitudes at this time. One day, as he saw the crowds gathering, Jesus went up on the mountainside and sat down. His disciples gathered around him and he began to teach them. God blesses those who are poor and realize their need for him, for the kingdom of heaven is theirs. God blesses those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Next slide. God blesses those who are humble, for they will inherit the whole earth. God blesses those who hunger and thirst for justice, for they will be satisfied. God blesses those who are merciful, for they will be shown mercy. God blesses those whose hearts are pure, for they will see God. God blesses those who work for peace, for they will be called the children of God. God blesses those who are persecuted for doing right, for the kingdom of heaven is theirs. God blesses you when people mock you and persecute you and lie about you and say all sorts of evil things against you because you are my followers. Be happy about it. Be very glad, for a great reward awaits you in heaven. And remember, the ancient prophets were persecuted in the same way. This idea of confession, this idea of laying yourself bare to those around you. And what really sticks out to me is this idea of mercy. That if you can be merciful to someone when they confess to you, you will be shown mercy in those moments. To those that show mercy, mercy is given. And it seems mercy and confession can be linked in these moments. I wonder what it was like to be on the side of the hill as Jesus was kind of throwing down the countercultural, the Jesus economy in this moment. You see, the people that are around him were a variety of backgrounds. Some of them may be listening because they despise Jesus and they wanted to figure out how to catch him. Others were sitting there in those moments because they were the downtrodden. They were the less than. They were part of the culture that people looked down upon in those moments. And I wonder, as Jesus shared this, was it silent? As he shared these things, as he shared these moments with them, these beatitudes, as these blessings, I wonder if people's jaws just kind of opened up and said, that's me. See, I get to inherit the kingdom of heaven because I am the less than. I wonder if some people in the crowd were yelling out, that's money. Oh, that's good. Right? That is good because that's where I'm at. That's my heart. That's my brokenness. And as he shares this with them, their lives are brought up. It says, if I can live like this, if I can live in this economy of Jesus, this way, things will be different. Confession is all over the New and Old Testament. And I love looking at the Old Testament of confessions, and you see such a difference of confession. You see Saul, as he is confronted by Samuel in various moments of his life, that he refuses to confess. Or if he does confess, it's because it's all on him, right? He takes all of the glory. He takes all of the honor when that's supposed to be somebody else. And then you have King David, and King David has said that he is a man after God's own heart. And this has nothing to do with that he lived a perfect, sinful life. It has nothing to do with the fact that he did nothing wrong. But it's the fact that in those moments that he knew he needed to confess, he took ownership of that, right? He stood in those moments and said, that's right, this is me, and I need to walk in this. Have you ever felt that tension of confession? That you knew you needed to walk towards someone and talk with them and share with them your brokenness, or share with how they've hurt you. Maybe you knew that you needed to share with God your brokenness and your sins. You see, there is tension in confession. See, the tension is there to drive us to the point where we are either going to be broken before him, or we ignore these moments and become numb to the tension in confession. See, King David knew that in these big moments, that Samuel showed him his brokenness, showed him his sin. He knew if I don't drive myself to the Lord, to God, then I'm only going to be going further and further away. A few months ago, I kind of been walking through some really difficult things. I've been walking through some tension. I've been walking through some fears, and I knew that there was some distance between myself and some other people in my life. And so as I knew I could feel this tension building, I knew that I needed to go and confess some things to people. And it wasn't sin. It wasn't this big sin where I had been sinning or they had been sinning. It was just this tension of something's wrong here. And you've been there, you've experienced that in a relationship with somebody where maybe you've been not kind or you've not really been yourself. And a lot of it was miscommunication, a lot of it was circumstances that I didn't understand or they didn't understand, that there was miscommunication in those places. But through those moments, there was this growing divide that I sensed in my heart. And so I called this person up, and I called Dylan, and I said, I need you to come down to my office. And I need to talk to you about something. Can we come down? And so he came down, and he sat down. We were talking about some various things, and I finally just said, I got to confess something to you. You see, I've been hurt a lot this past few months, and I can't keep going like this. There's a tension between you and me, and there's this moment that I can't get through. And I shared my brokenness, I shared my hurt to him, and as I shared this with him, I started to kind of own that moment, right? I owned it, and I said, I don't know why I'm feeling this ways, but I know this is kind of where I'm seeing my life. See, I'd held it in for far too long. And as he came in there, confession takes ownership of the moment. I didn't try to draw it on him and say, it's all your fault. You did this to me. If you hadn't been such this, and this, I owned it in that moment. So I knew I needed to take ownership of that moment. I needed to own that I've been hurt, to be clear that you didn't do anything to hurt me specifically, but our relationship is broken. There is no sin, but there is so much brokenness. And as I shared with Dylan what I've been walking through and where I've been coming from and kind of what the last few months had been like for me, he shared with me his brokenness. See, he opened himself up and said, I wish you had said this sooner. I wish you had come to me before this. I wish it hadn't got to this point. And I told him, yeah, you know what, you're right. And I confessed, I said, you know what, I should have come before you sooner. See, true confession honors the other person. True confession honors them because it puts them in a place that says, you know something, I'm wrong, I'm broken, and I need to honor you by treating you with the respect you deserve. I need to treat you with the honor that God has called us to do. I knew that there was no way forward for our relationship. And if I wasn't able to confess this moment before him and with him, then I was not able to walk forward in our friendship. See, deeper than that, I took ownership at that point. See, in order for me to really change my posture, the only way for us to walk forward was for me to take on the burden and give them back to God. See, in the economy of Jesus, confession points us to someone and something greater. It is why it is counter. See, confession of the culture points to ourselves. Confession of the culture says, look what I have done. Look at this elaborate confession that I have made before you. Look how well I'm confessing. See, in the economy of Jesus, confessing takes us to a place and a position to see, look what God has done. See, true confession doesn't say, look what I've done. True confession says, look what God has done in my life. Look what God can do in your life. See, confession creates unity. It creates a space to be free. See, King David was a mighty warrior. If you read through the Old Testament, story after story of David leading his troops into battle. And I wonder if this was made possible because he was willing to step into confession when he was broken. If he had been like Saul and kind of taken on and said, well, I'm not that wrong. They did something to bring me to this point. I don't believe that David would have had the same authority in battle that he had. See, David lived a life open and broken before those he was around in a way that they were willing to do anything for him. There's a story in the Old Testament how David was sitting around in camp, and as he was sitting there, he said, man, I'm thirsty. But I'm not this thirsty. I'm thirsty for a certain water. And there's water on the other side of the enemy from a well that I miss. That's the water I want. And so his mighty men, the men that had walked with him through battle after battle in unity with him, got up, got their stuff, went through the enemy lines, got the water, and brought it back to him. See, that's unity. That's a moment where there's nothing between those he is serving with in our lives. See, it's made possible because confession creates unity. See, one thing that's interesting about Dylan and I, my relationship is, sometimes people say, well, you guys have probably been really good friends for a long time. And I said, well, really not. I mean, we've known each other for about 15 years, but we really not have been really good friends until about 5 years ago. I've known Aubrey for 38 years, and she still thought highly enough of me to tell Dylan to ask me to come on their church plant. So that's good. But over the last 5 years, there have been moments of confession, good and bad. I've watched Dylan share with those around him when he's misstepped, when he's broken, when he's not hit the mark. Shortly after our conversation that day, as we sat in my office and confessed, and he called me again the next day, and we talked a little bit deeper on our brokenness, and as we were sharing back and forth, I was listening to some stuff, and I was prepping my message at the Veterans Home. And I came across a passage. I was listening to a sermon, and he talked about 1 Samuel 14. And this is what it says. I want to read this. 1 Samuel 14. One day, Jonathan, son of Saul, said to his young armor-bearer, "Come, let's go over to the Philistine outpost on the other side." But he did not tell his father. On each side of the pass that Jonathan intended to cross to reach the Philistine outpost was a cliff. One was called Bozez, and the other Sinai. One cliff stood to the north toward Michmash, and the other to the south toward Gibeah. Jonathan said to his young armor-bearer, "Come, let's go over to the outpost of those uncircumcised men. Perhaps the Lord will act on our behalf. Nothing can hinder the Lord from saving us, whether by many or by few." Now, I don't know about you, but if someone came to me and said, "Let's go do this. Let's go take that new ground, and perhaps we'll be effective. Perhaps we will be victorious." It doesn't really instill a lot of confidence in me. I'm looking like, so you're thinking it might or might not happen. Do we really want to go through with this? And so is that there must have been a bond between Jonathan and his armor bearer that the two of them, just the two of them, could go take on the enemy. Perhaps. No, it's not a lot of confidence in that. But see, confession removes the obstacles between us. See, confession removes those moments and those things that are between us that hinder our growth, that hinder that unity. And if we're able to step into those moments of confession, that can be removed. And then what you might not know about the armor bearer and Jonathan is that as they would go into battle, Jonathan, as they were walking or climbing or going towards places, would not carry his stuff. The armor bearer carried it, right? So the armor bearer would carry it, and he would be as close as he could be to Jonathan. And as he was close to him, as I was walking with him, when it was time for battle, when it was time to hand the sword to Jonathan, he would hand it off and give that to him. So this was a very special relationship between Jonathan and the armor bearer, right? They had to have this unity in the two of them, that they knew each other's steps, that when it's time for me to step in and hand this to you, you will be ready. And so what does the armor bearer say in this moment? Let's see what he says. Do all that you have in mind, his armor bearer said. Go ahead. I am with you, heart and soul. Wow. See, that's somebody that I want on my team. See, that's somebody that I want to walk through life with. That's somebody that I want to serve. It's hard to be employed under somebody if you have no trust with them. If you don't trust their steps, if you don't trust that they have your best intentions at heart. By the way, we walk with people, doing battle with people, going through things with people you're close to. See, confession removes the space between. That space between us, if they were really going to do battle well together, if they're going to go through this together, Jonathan and his armor bearer, if they're going to go through this, they had to be close. They need to be hand in glove as they work through the successful battles. See, as they finish the story, they go up and they get to the top of the hill, and they have this like code word between the two of them. If the Philistines look at you and say, bring it, then we're going to go attack them. But if they say, what are you guys doing down there? Then we're going to back off. And so they went to the top of the hill. The Philistines challenged them, and Jonathan and his buddy walked through that and fought through that and defeated the army. I wonder if we would talk to God this way. I am with you, heart and soul. I wonder if this is how we respond to our spouse. I am with you, heart and soul. I wonder if this is how you respond to those you do life with, friends, family. I am with you, heart and soul. See, confession is kind of an icky topic. It's something that we don't want to be involved with. We love it. We love confession until God presses it into our hearts. But see, confession is not just us and God or us and others. The bigger moment is what we confess with ourselves. When we confess our own hearts that we cannot forgive where we're at. That we can't forgive ourselves. See, I can forgive everybody else. I can confess that I may have wronged other people, but when will we stop and offer confession in our lives where we've missed the marks? See, confession is where we let our guard down, where we concede that I don't have everything in the right order. Confession is then saying, I've moved away from where you wanted me, God, when God hasn't moved. Confession and forgiveness are signs of the kingdom of God. What are your signs saying today? Is your life, your actions, giving clear direction towards a Savior? Or is it limiting people's view of a God who saves and forgives? Dietrich Bonhoeffer says this: in confession, the light of the gospel breaks into the darkness and the seclusion of the heart. See, God is calling us to reveal the brokenness, the pain, the places in our lives when we need Him to come in and heal us. But when are we? How is He able to heal our hearts, heal our lives, when we refuse to confess those places that are broken? Can you say today to God, I am with you, heart and soul. Whatever you want, let's go. Can you say that to those in your life you built a relationship with? I am with you, heart and soul. I think that's what confession does, is confession brings about that moment that we are willing to step into those places of brokenness. And as I sat there with Dylan, and as I was so broken that I was willing to step away if that's what needed to happen. That I was broken to a point where I didn't know if I can keep going forward. And I couldn't keep going forward because there was something between us. And for you today, what is standing between you and God? What is there that you need to confess in your hearts and your lives?
Thank you for listening to the Restore Church podcast. We are a church for the rest of us. We hope that God will use this to connect you with Jesus, kick you out of your comfort zone, and propel you to impact your community. If Restore has been helpful in your journey with Jesus, we ask you to consider investing in Restore by giving online at restoremtown.com. With your support, we will continue to restore Marshalltown and Central Iowa.